Good morning, and thank you so much for serving on our panel as we review our Building Resiliency and Infrastructure and Communities grants to come up with a list that is going to bring some good money in our state. So I thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm going to share our screen here, and we will go over our scoring criteria. This comes directly from FEMA, and we hope that this, just like last year, is going to make us a very competitive state. So starting with our agenda for today, I'll try to make this quick and painless. It is why we need BRIC funds, first of all. For those of you who are not familiar with the program, I'm going to talk about that and what we're looking for, and by we, I mean the Department of Public Safety and also FEMA ultimately, and how we'll score each application. Starting with what we won last year. You know what? We won more individual projects than any other state, and we think that this review process is part of what helped with that competitiveness. We were 7th in the nation in amount awarded, only 2nd behind Florida here in our region, and what you see over to the right there is the 6 projects that were awarded here in the state, ranging from moving pump stations to relocating entire towns, as in the case of Princeville. Duck out on the coast, some NC12 improvements, much needed improvements there for that project. So just short of about $30 million. And of course, that funding has doubled to $1 billion this year. So we're hoping that we can at least double our take and bring in $50 million here in the state, if not better. So let's see how we can do that. This is the process that the sub-applicants, the towns, and the counties have already gone through. And we are at this state prioritization panel. So the scores that we come up with as a panel will prioritize our projects. And by our projects, we started with 145 at the LOI phase. We had our first panel back in October and narrowed that down to about 66 that were invited to apply. And then those are the ones that we're going to be reviewing here on December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And hopefully those top 25 will become a list of real serious candidates that have a chance of getting funded at the national level. So the BRIC priorities, this is a slide directly from FEMA. This is what they're trying to do with these funds. First of all, to mitigate risk to public infrastructure. This is out of the hazard mitigation program. So we did have some submissions for infrastructure projects that really were not mitigating risk from a natural hazard. And so those did not proceed to this process. That is an important part of this grant program. And then they want to incentivize investments in disadvantaged communities. Now, this comes directly from the Justice 40 initiative from the Biden administration. You may be aware of that. It states that 40% of federal funds spent in these selected programs are to go to disadvantaged communities. What do they mean by disadvantaged communities? We're going to share that with you here in just a moment. And then also to mitigate risk to one or more community lifelines. You'll see that in what you'll be reviewing, but the lifelines themselves are not something that we're scoring on, because those 7 lifelines that you see at the top there really cover a broad spectrum of infrastructure. And so folks would be hard-pressed not to serve at least one of those, but they are expected to provide a narrative for how they are servicing one of those or more of those lifelines. And then to incorporate nature-based solutions. That is a big part of this scoring process, although that comes in on the technical review, which will be done at the FEMA staff level. So that will not be a part of our grading today. But all of these projects hopefully do include incorporating some nature-based solutions into the design and engineering practices of the projects. And then what they want to do is enhance climate resilience and adaptation. That's a very important one, and that'll be a large part of what you'll be looking for in these applications as we go over the scoring criteria. And then also to incentivize the adoption and enforcement of the latest published editions of the building codes, which is something that we get scored on at the state level. Those are the 6 priorities for the BRIC program, and that's what we're going to be looking for. If you look at what was funded last year, you have what was submitted over to the right and then what was awarded over to the left. I just want to point out three things. These three items are what you're going to be seeing in most of your applications that you'll be reviewing: flood control, utility and infrastructure protection, and also relocation projects. And so those are part of the top four, and that is the majority of what we've selected to move into this round. So you as a panelist are going to be looking for very specific qualitative criteria. There's 6 of them, and these are those. And I've sent you an attachment, an email that outlines each one of these in a printed form. If you want to have it printed out directly in front of you there, you'll have that email, and we'll go through those steps of what you'll do here in just a moment. So first, the risk reduction and resiliency and effectiveness. You'll see that that's 35 points. It's the largest of the scoring weight, and so they can get up to 35 points. We have a choice of 6 in each one of these, starting for not at all. If they don't address that criteria at all, it'll be 0, up to 35 if they beyond exceed that expectation. So that first one, and then of course at the end there's a 5-point overmatch for if they've provided more than the minimum allowable funds for the local match for the project, and we've pre-filled those into your scoring sheets based on what was submitted. This is what your scoring sheet will look like. You'll have either 5 or 6 for each one of the panels already filled out there with the overmatch and the names and the numbers, and you'll get a separate email for each one of the applications that you'll be reviewing. And you'll just circle your score, and then during your 60 to 90 minute conversation that we have either on the second or the third, that's when we'll come up with that consensus score, and you'll write that in, and those, we want your panel to match. So if someone has a 35 and someone has a 21, we'll talk about that and come up with a median 28. That first qualitative criterion, that one is about the risk reduction and resiliency. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I'll point out the 3 bullet points on each one that I think FEMA in all the webinars that I've been attending really focus on: effective risk reduction, increase to resilience, and ancillary benefits. They want to know what else are we helping out here, and they want you to provide some narrative for that one. And is it an innovative project? Are these just regular, everyday, what everyone else in the world is doing? Or is this something that has a little bit of innovation to it? And then this one is going to be found inside of the scope of work section. And what do I mean by that? This is the basic of what you'll get from each one of the sub-applicants. You'll have a community, an evaluation, a BCA, and methodology. You can look at those if you want to, but we will not be scoring those. That gets into the number and the cost effectiveness, which is important. They're not eligible if the project doesn't, if the benefits do not outweigh the expense. But then the one all the way over to the right, the scope of work, that really should be the first one that you read. The SOW for each one of these sub-applicants, please read that one all the way through. That one describes the project and gives you the basis for what it is they're trying to do in the community. And then I showed you here, if you have a really excellent sub-applicant that submitted not only the bare bones, but the attachments. Look at those attachments. Now, what we did in some webinars that we offered to each of the communities is go over some winning applications from last year, not only from our state, but one out of California. And we pointed out that they included attachments that specifically addressed the scoring criterion. So that's what we've asked them to do. It's not a requirement, but you'll see here in this example, each one of those 6 scoring items are listed as a title of an attachment. And what that does is make it friendly to the reader. It makes it easy for the panelist, us, to find the information that's needed to give them a good score. And so we hope that you'll find quite a bit of that in what you'll be reviewing tomorrow. And then the second one is 20 points available for climate change and future conditions. We hope that they have addressed things like sea level rise and temperature change, population increases in their consideration for their projects. And here you'll see a little breakdown and some specific questions. Again, these are FEMA slides. This is what they've used to train people on how to win this grant. And we're sharing those with you so that you'll know what to look for. They want to enhance climate adaptation. They want projects that are responsive to the effects of future conditions. And they want projects informed or connected to the plans and planning efforts and their assessment of future conditions. So that's what they mean by this one, and that's what the points are for. And really, I know when I served as a panelist for the West Coast applications last year, we were able to find a lot of people that made statements but didn't provide backup data sources, and that is a very important part of this process. You'll find that in the attachments. We've encouraged them, if they present data, to say, to quote that and cite it and say, you can find this in future conditions attachment A. So if they don't, then that's something that you'll want to deduct points for. This is found in the evaluation section of the application. And so there again, that's from Gastonia. What you'll see, their evaluation is what you'll go into there. And there's a specific question. I'm going to look right there inside of the evaluation, discuss how anticipated future conditions are addressed by this project, and then they provide the narrative. Notice over to the right, this is a direct screenshot. What you're reading is not so reader friendly in the format. These are PDFs pulled directly from the FEMAGO grant management system. So it's all bold. There's no indentation or anything like that. So you'll have to spend some time reading that. Look, I don't know how much, I know we've got some foundation folks here, and we appreciate that. You might be more experienced with federal grants. A lot of those things are 25 pages long. We're lucky these are not. They're much shorter than that. The attachments have the ability to be lengthy, but the narrative itself is not. So you're not going to be tasked with too much today. Also check for that future conditions attachment that I mentioned. If they have provided that, that's a good place to find the scoring criterion that you're looking for. The third one is 15 points for implementation measures. What they mean by that is how they are going to pull this thing off. How is a small community going to handle $8 million dumped on them for a road project? They want to know how the cost will be managed. They want to know how the schedule will be managed. Have they even included a schedule in the project application? Innovative techniques that are being used. And then this is a big one. I'm going to circle that one. Technical and managerial staff. A lot of them will just say county staff is going to do this. Which county staff? We need to know. We need to know what their experience is. Have they done projects like this in the past? Have they managed large federal grants like this? Something that's going to inspire confidence. See that up at the top right in the first bullet on the right? Does the application inspire confidence that the project can be completed successfully? They don't want you to give the money back, and they don't want you to end up on the 6 o'clock news for using the money incorrectly. So give us the technical staff that is going to be used to pull this thing off appropriately. This one is found in the scope of work section. We do not take off, if they provide it in a different section, you find it somewhere else, note that. Put that in your notes, because trust me, that'll come up in your panel discussion. They'll say, well, I gave them 5 points and you gave them 25 points. Why? And you look at your notes and you see, well, I found the information about their managerial staff in the evaluation section, or I found it in attachment B. Make those notes. That'll help our panel to go quicker when we discuss these. So there is the example of inside of the scope of work, how will the mitigation activity be implemented? That's the direct question that correlates with this one. So population impacted is the fourth one. That one is worth 25 points potentially. What we want to know there is community-wide benefits. And I do want to point out that even if it doesn't serve 100% of the community or region that the project is coming from, they want you to talk about the community that it does involve. FEMA used in their examples to us projects that only served 50% of the community because maybe it was a water treatment facility that's only handling half the county or something like that. They don't want to take off for that, but they do want you to provide a narrative that describes what benefits the community has, particularly those disadvantaged communities. And then, is it designed to maximize positive impacts and minimize negative impacts on the disadvantaged populations? They want you to talk about that. And we're going to go into what FEMA means by disadvantaged communities here in just a moment. It's not just about the financials. How will the project reduce cascading impacts to those community lifelines? Just the 3 bullet points I pulled out there. This one, again, is found in the scope of work section. There's a question that relates specifically to the population impacted. Now, this is that Justice 40 slide. I'm going to include that in the email that you've probably already seen, that Justice 40 slide that comes directly from FEMA. You'll see distressed neighborhoods, linguistic isolation, low income. Of course, those are the normal ones that we consider. But I want to point out 2 things, and this has been shared with the communities when, say, it's a beachfront community that goes, we're not going to do very well on our disadvantaged communities scoring. But look, disproportionate climate impacts, disproportionate environmental burden, and high cumulative impacts. You know, a coastal community is going to have disproportionate climate impacts because they get more hurricanes than anyone else. So if they make a narrative for that, fine. That satisfies the Justice 40 criterion for disadvantaged populations. Moving on to the 5th one, outreach activities. There's 2. The very last 2 are outreach and leveraging partners. I would say out of all of our applications last year, this was the one that was the weakest because there isn't a specific question. FEMA Go doesn't say what outreach activities were involved in planning the project or in the implementation. That's sad. I wish they did, but they do not. So you have to look for this one. But the outreach is different than the partners. Partners are those, well, we'll talk about that one in a second, but outreach is how are they involving the community? Are they doing public hearing sessions? Are they having public comments at the council meetings? Have they put this on their Facebook page, which is much more popular these days than that community meeting where people are throwing rocks at the councilman? But they want you to, they offer you 5 points for those outreach activities and expect you to mention that in your application. What do they mean by outreach activities? How are the types of community planning processes talked about in it? What public outreach and engagement strategies will be used to disseminate the information? Some of the things are required by FEMA. They have to do a final public notice in several different formats. So talk about that. We need you to say, we're going to be publishing this in the newspaper, on Facebook, in the hallway, in the community, on our website. Please, that's what they get 5 points for. Include this in the scope of work section, but as I pointed out, that's not so clear. So also there's a couple other places I think you would want to look for this one. That is in the evaluation section, and if they've included an outreach attachment, which they were pressed to do. We highly recommended that they do those attachments. And then finally, the leveraging partners. That one's worth 15 points. And they want to know what communities, look, this doesn't have to be just people who are writing a check for this project. Hopefully everybody's going to get full points in the leveraging partners. We've provided a lot of resources for them, including some state resources that are available to all the communities so that they can say something about what partners are involved in the project. But let's see. You tell me when we get into this discussion. Did they list the partnerships? Did they anticipate the outcome of those partnerships and any challenges? And then do they cite educational resources? Have they talked about materials and other things that went into the planning and that will go into the implementation of this project? This one is directly right there in the evaluation section. There's a screenshot of what that evaluation section looks like. And right down at the bottom, describe the involvement of partners to enhance the mitigation activity outcome. I want to point out to you, if they've watched our training videos, they'll know that this last page of the application, the evaluation, has a lot of yes or no questions at the top. So folks get down to those last couple of questions and they think those are 1 and 2 sentence responses because the rest of it has been yes or no. If they've paid attention, that is not the case. A lot of valuable information comes from this evaluation section. So if they've given you 1 or 2 sentence answers, I think you'd be hard pressed to give them an exceeds an excellent score of the total point in that particular score. So what's going to come next? We've given you the time. We've scheduled your group to meet for a 60 to 90 minute virtual discussion on December 2nd or the 3rd. We're going to reach a consensus score during that so that all 3 people on the panel agree. I'll be there to help guide that. And those comments and feedback, that's a very important part of this because that will be shared anonymously, but shared with the sub-applicant so that they could go back and spend the next month in making their application more competitive. The state prioritization will be set now with this panel, but they can still come back. In those examples I showed you earlier, there was a project out of Lumberton. They were 17 in our state prioritization, but they came back in that second round and really beefed up that application and won the money. So we're hoping we get some more of those. That's a look at the email that you've received. I just want to go through those 6 steps in this process, what you are to expect. First of all, watching this training video. I encourage you to print out the attached 7-page scoring book. It has each one of the 6 scoring criterion slides that I just shared with you. And then the last page is where you'll actually do the scoring. You can scan those in and send those to me when it's over. If you are digitally inclined and you'd rather do that, just highlighting it with your Word or your PDF document, fine. No problem at all. But you are going to want to manually, you're going to want to digitally then write in the consensus score so that they all match when they're submitted to us in the end. In case somebody comes back with sour grapes and wants to know why they didn't get funded or why they were number 57 in the state prioritization list, we need to be able to provide that. Read the 5 or 6 grants that are assigned to you. They're going to arrive in separate emails today. If you have questions during the review, we've made it very easy for you. There's a WebEx link that's going to be in that link. You can click that and boom, there I am to answer your questions. A couple other people from our team will be available. And you can also call. My number is on the email or send an email, whatever your preferred method is. Record your scores on the scoring sheet on the last page of that scoring book as shown in this video. And then finally, on either December 2nd or 3rd, depending on what your scheduled time is, use that number 2 link that's on this email that I'm showing you. Click that, come in early so that we'll be ready to start on time. We have really only 15 minutes per application, so we want to make sure that we're not wasting time by having technical issues. Try to get there early. Let's get this thing done and do a great service for our state. Guys, thank you so much. You're the best. You're giving us time. Some of you are state employees. I know this is part of your job, but a lot of you are not. And we thank you for volunteering your time to bring as much money as possible into our state. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck and enjoy.